This program is brought to you by the partners of A Rood Awakening International. Help others find truth. Support A Rood Awakening International today.
Skeptics are quick to point out that there are discrepancies in the Bible. One gospel says this, another gospel says that, but no one makes the effort to resolve these discrepancies, except Dr. Miles Jones. Dr. Jones joins us tonight to determine whether the common assumption that Yeshua was a carpenter is true or just a misunderstanding. Because it's the end of the sixth day, the sun is set, and this is Shabbat Night Live. Hey, Shabbat Shalom, Torah fans. Welcome to Shabbat Night Live with Michael Rood. I'm your host, Scott Laird, and please welcome my co-host, the Chief Operating Officer of A Rood Awakening International, Ted Clayton.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Have a wonderful Shabbat. We're so glad to have you here on Shabbat Night Live with us.
Indeed. Ted, tonight we find out if Yeshua really was a carpenter and why that matters. Another story that matters is Hanukkah is no longer in the Bible, and that celebration is just 2 weeks away, and that's according to the astronomically and agriculturally corrected biblical Hebrew calendar. There we have it on our screen there. This is the second Shabbat in the month of Kislev. It's also Black Friday. A lot of people go shopping today. And a lot of people ask us if we have, Black Friday deals on our calendar, for example. The answer is no, but we do have a Cyber Monday sale, which we call Mission Monday. Yes. So we had got all things together for this. We have some really neat things. I think one of the craziest things we have, Ted, I think you'll agree in this, is that apron we've got.
I think it's absolutely fantastic. We try to create things that will be discussion starters. And what a great way, if you're having a barbecue outside or having a cookout somewhere where you can have an actual A Rood Awakening apron that says, "See you when the smoke clears."
It's hilarious. I love it. And it was just it was the most fun thing. I remember when we told Michael about this, he just cracked up.
Oh my gosh, he just rolled. He said that is just the neatest thing he's ever seen.
So we have that. We have that also. There's some other items we've got. We'll just keep those until Monday. So anyway, Mission Monday, what we're talking about is our Cyber Monday sale. 12 hours, 12 deals. It all starts Monday, 9 a.m., all kinds of fun stuff. We've also got things we've never offered before. We've got deals involving the MichaelRood.tv app.
Yes.
We also have the MichaelRood.tv app pop socket. One of those things you put on the back of your phone to stand it up, or if you have a large phone, you can sort of push it between your fingers and hold on to it. So we have one of those. We've got all kinds of 2-for-1 deals, all kinds of bundles we're putting together. We actually have a bundle where you can get every episode of Shabbat Night Live from all 2020 all together.
Right.
Crazy deal on that. So, Ted, there's all kinds of things coming up. And we've got 12 deals. That's all coming up. We start at, 9 a.m. Monday, right?
That's right. You can watch it on the MichaelRood.tv app. If you have that, you can watch it there. You can watch it on our website. You can watch it on Facebook. You can watch it on YouTube. It's everywhere. It's Mission Monday 2020, Monday starting at 9 a.m. And there are tremendous values on great resources for you to learn truth with Michael Rood's ministry.
Indeed, and this is stuff that you're going to love all year long. We only do it once a year, so don't say, I'll catch it next time. No, you're going to be waiting a whole year if you do that, so don't be doing that. So that starts, again, at 9 a.m. Monday, and it's all, if you want to go online and find it, very easy. Everything's all in one spot. It's at aroodawakening.tv/Mission Monday. Very simple to get to. Now, we also have testimonials flooding in. We have lots of video testimonials we've been sharing over the last couple of months. And this is one we just received from Cynthia. Let's take a look.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Greetings from Florida. My name is Cynthia, and I'd like to thank you for this opportunity to share a little of my testimony with you today. I've been learning about Hebrew roots, or as I call it, Bible roots of the faith, since 2015. However, years ago, I did learn that Jesus' real name was Yeshua, and I started to call upon him by that name. But I had no idea what I was missing out on until one day I happened to be in the right place at the right time, and I was able to view an episode of A Rood Awakening from Israel, Truth or Tradition. From that moment on, I developed a hunger and a thirst for more of the truth and less of the traditions of men. It was a no-brainer for me to stop celebrating Christmas, December 25th, as Yeshua's birthday, as I realized that it is the ultimate insult to celebrate our Master Yeshua's birthday on the same day as all these other fake gods. The teachings at A Rood Awakening, especially those from Michael and Nehemiah, have introduced me to a whole new world that I never knew existed. And I thank Yahovah for that, because it's really changed my life.
Okay, so there's Cynthia describing how Michael Rood has changed her life. A wonderful story. And, Michael at this time really appreciates videos he's getting from other folks, little get well wishes. As everyone knows, Michael had a stroke. He's recuperating. That's why Ted and I are doing this. That's why we have Miles in to pinch hit for Michael. Michael really appreciates those videos, doesn't he, Ted?
He does indeed, ladies and gentlemen. You have no idea how much Michael does appreciate your thoughts, your prayers, your videos coming in. He just loves it. And he'll sit there and he'll be doing his workouts, his PT workouts and stuff. And he'll be just sitting there watching these videos over and over again. So you're lifting Michael up. And we just thank you for that. We really, really do.
Indeed, we do. And another thing that Michael appreciates is your prayers, your videos, but also your financial support. Just because Michael's recuperating doesn't mean things stop here. We're trying to keep the mission going. Michael said, look, I don't care whether I'm at home or at hospital, whatever. You guys keep things going. The word must go out. And in order to do that, that's why we have, all ministries do this and we do it too. And it's just a simple truth of the matter. We need to plan for 2020. We need to figure out what we're doing, what we're not doing. We have things in the hopper like Chronological Gospel Season 3. Where are we going to put that? Where can we afford to put that? Because we have to pay to have this broadcast somewhere, don't we, Ted?
Yes, indeed we do, Scott, and thank you. It's our time right now to plan for 2021. So, ladies and gentlemen, we need your financial help more than ever. You can give your end-of-year financial gift directly to us here at A Rood Awakening. It's great tax savings for you to be able to give to your favorite ministry here. And we just thank you once again, because we do have Chronological Gospel Season 3 that Michael had already taped, and we're putting that together. We're going to put that on the air, and I need to know what television stations we can afford to buy to put this on this year, because as I know, we can't do this without you. And we greatly appreciate your support, and we're going to continue to get the gospel to the four corners of the earth like the waters cover the sea.
Indeed. Thanks for that, Ted. And yes, thank you for your support. And you can give by going to the bottom of the screen there and using one of the methods you are seeing there. All right. Well, author and historian Miles Jones, Dr. Jones, is joining us tonight to determine whether the common assumption that Yeshua is a carpenter was true, or is it a misunderstanding? Interesting. Guardians of the Hebrew Gospels, Episode 3 is coming up next.
Fear, doubt, disappointment, discouragement, and anger. These are all results of focusing on the wrong purpose. If we want to see something restored, we have a responsibility as believers to turn back to Yehovah and focus on His purposes. In times like these, we need to ask ourselves, which side will you focus on?
It seems to me that if we are living in the days that Yeshua described, then the time has come for there to be a people unlike anything the world has ever seen or will ever see again.
Michael Rood welcomes Bill Cloud for a special teaching, Focus, available in November only. And the only way to watch it is to receive it as our gift. Donate a $50 love gift and we'll send you Focus with Bill Cloud on DVD or Blu-ray. Or for a donation of $100, we'll send you the teaching plus a 4-foot Showers of Blessing umbrella, inscribed with Acts 14:17, featuring the Hebrew name of Yehovah. Or as a special offer for a donation of $300, we'll send you Focus, the Showers of Blessing umbrella, plus a beautiful modern menorah with brushed aluminum finish. These gifts are available in November only and supplies are limited. Make your donation now and receive the $50 gift, the $100 gift, or the $300 gift. Remember, this offer ends November 30th and supplies are limited. Thank you for your donation to A Rood Awakening International. Call now to receive your gifts. 888-766-3610. That's 888-766-3610. Or get your gifts online at monthlylovegift.com.
Some of the traditions in modern-day Judaism are what Yeshua said are takanot, laws which change biblical law, which are forbidden, and Yeshua said don't do them. But other traditions are remembrances of good things in the past, and they are a shadow picture of good things to happen in the future. On the Sabbath, we take 2 challah loaves, 2 loaves of bread. This represents the manna, the double portion that we received on the 6th day. This was God's provision for us. And this is what it continues to mean to us today. When Yeshua, just before his crucifixion, the night before his crucifixion, at the Last Supper that he had with his disciples, he took bread and he blessed, not the bread, he blessed the Most High. And he said, Baruch atah Yehovah Eloheinu melech haolam hamotzi lechem min haaretz. And he broke the bread and he said, this is my body, which is broken for you. As often as you do this, remember this. By his stripes, we were healed. And then he took the cup and he said, in the prayer of Melchizedek to Abraham, Baruch atah Yehovah Eloheinu melech haolam, borei peri hagafen. Blessed are you, Yehovah, our God, King of the universe, creator of the fruit of the vine. And Yeshua said, this, what you have been doing for 1,000 years from the time of Abraham, this represents the renewed covenant in my blood. This is how I will pay for the broken covenant. I will pay the death penalty and do this until I come.
It is by grace you have been saved. We are saved by grace, but reward is of merit. So do you know about Yeshua, or would you really like to know Yeshua and know what he wants you to do with your life and understand him and understand the Gospels and understand really how the prophets and the Torah speaks about him and really know who he is? That is the difference in knowing the Hebrew Gospels versus the Greek Gospels. And we are going to talk to someone about that today. Please welcome historical linguist, Dr. Miles Jones.
I'm glad to be back. This is great.
Yes.
The third in our series on the authentication of the Hebrew Gospels.
Yes. Now, why do the Hebrew Gospels need authentication? Why?
Well, it's the first question. We have Hebrew Gospels. Are they just a translation from some Greek or Latin version around there? Or did they come from a first century source? And we have been able to authenticate them. Those who watched our first two shows in the series know what we've done. We looked at Jerome's comments on the crucifixion of Yeshua and the rending of the lintel stones of the temple as it's written in the Hebrew Gospels.
Yes.
And we showed how those are exactly what, as Jerome said, in the Hebrew Gospels from Catalonia and the Hebrew Gospels from Cochin, India, separated by 2,000 years and 5,000 miles.
It's incredible.
There's no way that's a coincidence, right? So these both come from an authentic first century source. What Jerome called the tradition of the early church, the earliest church, the first century church.
Now, again, people have maybe avoided this because, not even just modern people, but people in general have avoided the Hebrew Gospels because they're afraid that maybe it would change their faith, or maybe Yeshua wouldn't be the Messiah if they saw this other gospel. So they said, no, that's another gospel. I'm not touching that. I don't want to see it.
Well, most people don't know about the Hebrew Gospels because they have been denied. The Greek primacy of the Bible, no Hebrew Gospels existed.
Right.
Well, they did exist, I'm sorry. And it would be a moot point, except that we have the manuscripts now, which is something you couldn't say of just a few years ago when I started working with these. But we talked about the authentication of them. Yes, but that is the fear. That is the fear that is going to challenge the faith of believers. And I got to tell you, in my own faith, it has grown enormously by study of the Hebrew Gospels. Yes, there's some differences, but nothing that changes the most important elements of the story. But there are things that are really, really critical to understanding our Hebrew Messiah.
And getting the proper story around him.
Right.
Who he was and knowing him. Not just knowing about him in a surface level story. This is getting to know him, and it enriches your faith, if anything. It's not going to deny your faith. It's not going to change your faith. It's going to make it better.
Right, but it's just, you start to pick apart that things, and so much of it is what you've been told. Church tradition tells you it's like this, and then you find out it's something else. But that something else gives you a really important perspective on who our Hebrew Messiah was. So we're going to take up the third in our series of Hebrew Gospels. We talked about the Hebrew Gospels from Cochin, India, and the Hebrew Gospels from Catalonia. Now, in the same century as the Hebrew Gospels from Catalonia, and in the same region, in Spain, Catalonia, there was another manuscript called the Shem Tov manuscript. Now, Nehemiah Gordon is an expert on this, and we have worked together on this and shared information. What I did is I did a comparison of the elements of the Hebrew Gospels from Catalonia and the Shem Tov manuscript, and the conclusion is basically there are so many similarities that are in no other version anywhere, whether in Greek or Latin or whatever. They had to come from the same source.
Now, what does that help us understand by what we're about to show and authenticate here? What does showing the similarities between these two manuscripts prove to us? What does it help us understand?
That there was an extant manuscript of the Hebrew Gospels that was available up into the medieval times, because this is like 15th century, in Spain, which is called Sepharad in the Bible. In Sepharad, there was an extant Hebrew Gospel that survived all that time. Now, I'm never satisfied with that. I go into the context. There very definitely was a Messianic church early on in Sepharad, and they preserved the Hebrew Gospels. They took them with them. You may remember that when they left, when the Roman army surrounded Jerusalem, an angel came to them and said, look, when the armies are surrounding you, bug out. I'm paraphrasing, but by the way.
That's in the original Hebrew, bug out. Yeah,
yeah, and of course the Romans were happy to do that because there'd be fewer soldiers and people they would have to fight. So they would let people go. So the church moved. It moved to Pella in Jordan. And yes, after a while, some people did come back. Some of the Nazarenes and the Ebionites settled in Pella. And some immigrated to Sepharad, and they would have carried the Hebrew Gospels with them. And we have proof of all these steps. That's why you need a researcher like me who's willing to dig into that stuff. So you don't just settle for the manuscript. You've got to get into the historical context and see what information we have that supports that this manuscript actually existed in that time period.
All right.
And where it came from. So we have it. We have a lot of detail.
Well then, Dr. Jones, take it away. Take us into the detail.
That's why I wrote a book on it called The Sons of Zion versus the Sons of Greece, so you can see all of this detail outlined for you. But let's go to the Shem Tov manuscript.
All right.
This was copied by Shem Tov ibn Shaprut, who was forced to debate with the Christian bishops. And this was very important because if you were judged to have lost this debate, Shem Tov was he was a Jew, he wasn't a Christian, then you would, and your entire community would be forced to convert to Christianity. So he wrote that by virtue of the fact that he had read Hebrew Matthew and knew what they were going to ask him and therefore knew how to respond, that he gives glory to his race by having studied this, because he makes sure to tell you it is forbidden.
Yeah. Now, Shem Tov, if I'm
it's
not
forbidden
mistaken,
for Jews to read this New Testament.
I got you.
But they had it in Hebrew.
So this is a nickname given. Because Shem Tov means good name, of good name.
Yes, that's right.
So.
And he wrote Shem Tov Ibn Shaprut, son of Shaprut, and he wrote the Ibn Bohan, which means the touchstone. And what it is Hebrew Matthew. There's more to it, which is also very fascinating. But the Hebrew Matthew is what we're interested in, and it's an accurate copy of Hebrew Matthew, because you're not going to change things. You'd be caught immediately, because he was writing this out along with his polemic arguments of you're having to argue for your life, your spiritual life in these Christian tribunals that they did, as part of forcing people to convert. And so Shem Tov wrote this, and we have it, and we're going to look at this. Okay. Done in the same time, in the same region, same time within the same century, in the same region of Sepharad as the Hebrew Gospels from Catalonia. So the question is, the Hebrew Gospels of Catalonia have been authenticated. What about the Shem Tov? How does it stand up against the Hebrew Gospels? Okay. So we're going to take a look at the Hebrew Gospels and the Shem Tov Hebrew Matthew in the brown paper on the right, and the Hebrew Gospels from Catalonia on the left. And here's one of the similarities. All right, this is what we're looking at. Similarities between these two that are in no other version of the Gospels anywhere in any language. Okay, so if there's enough of these, one can be a coincidence, right? But when you have a pattern of multiple similarities, correlations we call them, it has to come from the same source. And they're not simply a copy one to the other, because there are differences too, but they obviously came from the same source, a source of the Hebrew Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, that were extant at the time they were talked about. There's more than one. There were various historical attestations that these did exist and had existed all the way up to the medieval times. So let's look at one, and we were talking about, do we really know who our Hebrew Gospel is? Well, we all know that Jesus was a carpenter, right? So says the Greek Gospel.
So goes the story, yes.
So goes the story, but not in the Hebrew Gospel.
Really? Okay, who was he? Who was Yeshua the carpenter?
Actually, to be technical here, in Greek, it calls him a teknon, a builder. Okay. Okay, so, but in the Hebrew Gospel, in both the Hebrew Gospels from Catalonia, this is in Matthew 13:55, by the way, Matthew 13:55, it says that he is the son of the smith. And in the Shem Tov, that would be Ben Napach. And in the Shem Tov Hebrew Gospels, in Matthew, it also says he's the son of the smith, Ben Napach, same word. So those are similarities. Obviously, they're not in the Greek Gospels. Now, I know that may seem a little shocking to some people, but I tell you, I was a carpenter for many years. And when you're a carpenter, you do everything, I did roofing, I did plumbing.
Yeshua the handyman.
Yeah, I did everything. You really do a number of the different trades that are part of the building process. So, in the first century, it'd probably be even more so. If you needed nails or hinges, well, there's the forge, young man, go make them. Right.
You're the smith.
To call him a smith, rather a builder, that doesn't surprise me at all, because you're a carpenter. You do everything that's needed to make.
Well, if you think first century, there's not a lot of trees and wood in ancient Israel to be building buildings out of, like we would stick build things today. It's all kinds of things, like hinges and stone and...
Yeah, you'd use stone. You'd use wood, though, very definitely for openings and windows and stuff like that, and roofs. So, yeah, but you do a lot of different things. So they called him the smith, because I'm sure he did that along with everything else. But one interesting thing is in the Hebrew Gospels from Catalonia and the Shem Tov manuscript, they call him the son of the smith. Now, in the Greek Gospels, in Matthew 13:55, they call him the son of the carpenter. But when that same story is repeated in Mark, I mean, the exact same story. You remember, he goes back to, Galilee, to the place of his birth, and people say, well, isn't this the son of the smith or the son of the carpenter? But then in Mark, it gets generalized to Jesus the carpenter. That's where our iconic image of Jesus, using the Greek archetype, as a carpenter comes from, all right? But this is the very same story that they told in Matthew, and the words are coming out of the very same mouth of the neighbor, right? But in Matthew, it's son of the carpenter, and in Mark, it's the carpenter.
Okay.
It's the carpenter. Okay, well, in the Hebrew Gospels, it says son of the smith in both places. So there's no, that is a contradiction. Because it's the exact same story, the exact same speaker, but this time it's generalized to a carpenter, which is a natural mistake, right? Your father was a carpenter, you're a carpenter, and he was, as far as we know. That's just not what they said in Matthew and in Mark. So in the Hebrew Gospels, it repeats the very same phrase. So it's accurate in both cases. There's no contradiction. So it says that. So it says, is this not the son of the smith in Mark 6:3? So that's an interesting, we're probably the most dramatic thing. Oh my God, he was a blacksmith, not a carpenter. My faith is destroyed. Let me tell you, a builder does everything. Everything needs to be done, a builder does it.
Yes.
Okay, so here's another one that's very important. Here's a list of the apostles, and don't get excited. The apostles are exactly the same in the Greek gospel and the Hebrew gospel, all right?
The Apostle Henry, never heard of him.
But the order of them is different, okay? It may sound like a small thing to you, but Philip and Bartholomew are listed before James and John, okay? Big deal, right? But in the Hebrew Gospels from Catalonia and the Shem Tov Hebrew Gospel, they are listed in exactly the same order. But it is an order that's different from the Greek Gospels. So these are similar. We're trying to prove the similarities between the two that could not be coincidental. So this is just another one. It's the same in the two Hebrew sources, but it's different in the Greek.
Is there a reason why they're named differently? Have any hunches or a reason for that?
I don't have the vaguest idea why they would be different, but they are different. But the important thing is they are the same in the Hebrew Gospels from Catalonia and in the Shem Tov Hebrew Matthew, so they are the same. Here's another one that's more significant symbolically, is he talks about the centurion's son. Okay, so it was in the Greek Gospel, it says the centurion's servant, and it comes from a word, yeled, which our word lad comes from, which could be either, right? But in the Hebrew Gospels and in the Shem Tov manuscript, it was not the centurion's servant, it was the centurion's son who was ill. Now think about this story, the centurion said, look, I'm a man under authority. I understand authority. I'm not worthy for you, Yeshua, the Messiah, to be under my roof. But if you just say the word, it will be done. That's an incredible display of faith, isn't it?
It is.
It takes a lot more faith to do that when it's your son rather than if it's your servant.
Yes.
And it says in both the Greek and the Hebrew that at that hour when he said that, his son was healed.
A lot more desperation too. Just say, look, just do anything to save him.
Yeah.
A servant, if he dies, I'll get another servant. But my son, come on.
I assume he cared about the servant, but your son would be so much more critical.
Yes.
For you to display that kind of faith when it's your son is really a significant difference.
Yeah.
And it is that way in both the Hebrew Gospels from Catalonia and the Shem Tov Hebrew Matthew. But in the Greek, it's different. It talks about his servant. So that's an important one. So some of these will blow your mind, really. So in that one, it says, and the boy, the Yeled or the Nahar was healed at that moment when he said that. Here's another one, and this is really significant because we know when Miriam became pregnant by the Holy Spirit, and Joseph found out about it. I mean, how would you feel if your fiance turned up pregnant? And you would know it wasn't you. So obviously this guy must be going through some really some real agony over this. And it said he was meditating upon how to put her away privately so she would not be put to shame. Well, that's kind of a Greek concept there, because they really don't know any shame. The Greeks, so they sort of didn't even get the concept. But in the Shem Tov manuscript and in the Hebrew Gospels from Catalonia, it says they were concerned about her being put to death, which was indeed the ultimate punishment. Yeah, right. Yeah. It doesn't matter if you're engaged; you're all but married. Mm-hmm. So the ultimate penalty of that was death. It makes a lot more sense, and that is indeed the Hebrew perspective, much more so than the Greek perspective. They couldn't probably understand why anybody would be put to death over that.
That is more dramatic. That Mary could have been killed.
Yes, she could have been.
Yeah,
and he was trying to save her from actually possibly being put to death rather than merely being put to shame, as it says in the Greek. And that's one that obviously comes from a different cultural way to look at it. I mean, the Greeks, heck, in some of the Greek city-states, your daughter the right to manhood is to give yourself to a stranger in the temple. That's why they called them temple prostitutes. That was her. Coming of age ritual.
That was her bat mitzvah. That was her, yeah.
So, like I said, the Greeks say they didn't understand the concept of shame.
Goodness.
So that was quite a bit different. They wouldn't have been able to grasp
Not to mention their naked Olympics and such.
That too. Well, here's one in Matthew 2:2. It says the wise men, in the King James Version, it says, we are come to worship him. The wise men have come to worship him. In the Hebrew Gospels and the Shem Tov, it says, we have come to worship him bearing gifts. Okay, so these are just small things, but they showed that the Shem Tov, Hebrew Matthew, and the Hebrew Gospels have exactly the same, where it's different in all the other versions.
Wow.
All right, so that one's not very significant. Some of them are hugely significant. This one is a small thing. In Matthew 5:13, you are the salt of the earth, speaking to his talmidim, his students. And in the Hebrew Gospels, it says, then Yeshua the Messiah said to his talmidim, you are the salt of the earth. So this introductory thing was often left out in the Greek Gospels.
Okay.
Yeah, it was actually said of the Hebrew Gospels that they were a collection of the oracles of the Messiah. Oracles meaning sayings, as in the book of Proverbs.
Yes.
It was often spoken of that way. So here you have a standardized introduction to an oracle. Yeshua the Messiah said to his talmidim, right? And that's left out of the Greek, right? But it fits in with what we know about the Hebrew Gospels.
Well, hang on. Let's continue this in the next segment, because I think there's some interesting things you're hitting on here.
Okay.
So let's just continue in a second, but we want to give you just a few seconds here. If you're appreciating what Miles is teaching, as I am, we would invite you to support this ministry. Miles is here only because of your support. And through your support, it's the only way that others can see him as well. So you know the Messiah, Yeshua, to be true. But if you really want to know the truth of Yeshua, as we are finding out here, the deeper truths, the little nuances that make the Hebrew gospel a real difference in somebody's life, then we invite you to support this ministry so that we can continue to bring that truth to you. We're going to give you a couple of minutes to do that, and we'll be back in just a second. Thank you for your support of Shabbat Night Live. It is through your support that we are able to learn things like the woman caught in adultery was not originally in the Greek version of the Bible. Did you know that? It's only through the influence of the Hebrew Gospels that it ended up in the Greek translation of the Bible that you have in your home today. And Miles Jones, we want to thank you for bringing that truth to us today. And we have some more subtleties here that prove that the Hebrew Bible has always had an influence on the Greek translations.
It has, far more than people think. And that's what's so important about it, because, you know, if you believe in Greek primacy of the Bible and you've created a Greek church and its authority depends on you having the most authentic books of the Bible in Greek, you're not going to want to mention the Hebrew Gospels that came before it, right?
Yeah.
So nobody knows the story, and you're getting to hear it first on A Rood Awakening, right? And thank goodness, because Michael has been right up front with bringing stuff like this to light when even other Hebraic roots leaders are loath to mention it, because so many of them come out of the seminaries and they are indoctrinated with Greek primacy of the Bible. So, hey, Hebrew Gospels don't exist, never did. But we've seen so much in the last couple of episodes to know that's definitely not true. We have these manuscripts.
We've talked about,
we can authenticate them.
Yes, indeed. And then we talked about how that indoctrination can happen even with kids who grow up in a Christian or even Hebraic home. They go to a college or like a seminary, they get indoctrinated with different ideas without that parental influence there, or influence from Yehovah in the area of a seminary, and our minds get shifted.
They do, yeah, and a lot of it just occurs from never mentioning it. And we're going to talk about some of those differences in the Gospels between the Hebrew Gospels and the Greek Gospels, and some of them are small things, like, you know, that just serves to set up the context. Some of them are extremely important, like the parable of the woman taken in adultery. That's extremely important. That's the best known parable. And it was put into the Greek canon of the scriptures of the New Testament very late in the 16th century, the beginning of the 6th century. And it came from the Hebrew Gospels. And that's why it was put back in the content, in the canon of the Greek, because everybody knew the earliest church fathers mentioned that this came from the Hebrew Gospels, which was considered the most authentic gospel, even to them.
Who knows that? Yeah.
Yeah. So a lot of these things we're going to talk about here really were determined by the fact that they were in the Hebrew Gospels, even if they weren't in the Greek. And some of them will really surprise you. Here's one of them, Matthew 12:32, which is pretty simple. In the Greek Gospels, it says, "The queen of the south shall rise up in judgment." Well, what's to the south?
Florida.
Sheba, yeah. the queen of Florida. Sheba's to the south.
Oh, okay, all right.
And that's who they're talking about.
All right.
And we know that. Historically, we know that. But in the Hebrew Gospels and in the Shem Tov manuscript, it says the queen of Sheba shall rise up in judgment. Small things, but they're the same in the Hebrew. And what I'm talking about is, we're talking about a Hebrew manuscript tradition that all came from a first century source. And we have enough manuscripts of Hebrew Gospels now to prove that this is actually a valid thing.
Yeah.
There is a Hebrew manuscript tradition of the New Testament.
You were saying they're even in different languages.
Yes.
So that's how we can further prove
That's
it.
right. And we can do another episode on those when they come up. But I have at least 2 manuscripts that are translations from the Hebrew. And we can establish that for sure.
Wow.
And they would be a part of the Hebrew manuscript tradition as well, because they followed the Hebrew manuscript rather than the Latin or the Greek ones, right? So, and there are markers for them. Let's talk about some of those markers.
All right.
But first, let's look at these. Here's another small thing. We have piped unto you and you have not danced. In the Hebrew Gospels, in the Shem Tov manuscript, it says, we have sung unto you and you have not danced. So they're small things, but they're the same in the Hebrew manuscript tradition, not in the Greek. This one is really interesting. In the story of the lunatic demon, in Shem Tov and the Hebrew Gospels, it talks about the Father speaks to Yeshua and says, help me with my unbelief. But in the Hebrew Gospels, he says to him, help me strengthen my faith. says, help me with my faith. It's sort of exactly the opposite of what he said.
It is.
I guess you could make a reasonable mistranslation of that, but in the Hebrew manuscript tradition, he's talking about his faith. This is interesting too, because this is from Mark chapter 9, 20, 28, and in the Shem Tov manuscript, it's part of Matthew. So we know that part of Matthew. It's only a couple of verses. Generally in the Greek canon, the whole story is told in Mark in 10 verses, right? So originally that was in Matthew, and I think they did some shifting of things, to fit better, or for whatever reasons, They moved the parable of the woman taken in adultery, which was probably originally in Luke and was moved in. They took Luke was itself probably considered a part of the Hebrew Matthew text, but this part, the story of the lunatic demon, was in the Shem Tov manuscript, which is really kind of interesting.
And there again, who knows that? Who knew that these stories were swapped between Gospels? I mean, that is almost heretical to think of.
We think of it as heretical, but they were just sort of sifting things out, and the Matthew, the Hebrew Matthew with much of Luke attached, which is a little much, so they separated them and make Luke a separate book, so to speak. And when it was translated into Greek, and we're going to talk about this in just a minute, they added even more material into it. So it's kind of a hybrid. Originally written in Hebrew, later translated into Greek and expanded. So these things did happen. It took centuries for them to kind of get to the canon of it as we know now. The parable of the woman taken in adultery was not originally in John. It was probably in Luke.
And again, does not change the fact that Yeshua is Messiah and the Bible still lines up and Jehovah is in charge of it all at all moments.
Now, knowing the Hebrew Messiah better, far from challenging your faith, it grows your faith. I mean, it's a great thing. It has been for me. Here's one of the things that it did, and this is really a mistranslation, because in Exodus, the story of the Exodus chapter 25, verses 31 through 40, that's 10 verses, Yehovah himself on Mount Sinai teaches you how to make a menorah, right? And he ends up those 10 verses of how to do it with the 7 candlesticks and all. It says, remember to make it exactly like I told you to on the mountain of God, right? Exactly like I told you to. So this is why, and now later on in the 2nd century, it was forbidden by the Judaic priests, along with the name of God. He said, these things are too sacred for you knuckleheads. Only in the temple can the priest once a year say the name of God, and can we use the menorah? But it was clearly used in the household during the time of Yeshua, because he speaks of the menorah. Where in the gospel does Yeshua speak of the menorah?
Well, you don't hide a light under a bushel.
There you go. Most people could not answer that because it doesn't use the menorah anywhere in the New Testament or the Old Testament, because they deliberately changed the name because they do not want to make the primary icon of the Judaic church a Christian icon. So they mistranslated, and it is a mistranslation. It's like, they translate it as candlesticks, but that is a mistranslation. It's like saying the space shuttle is an airplane. I'm sorry. They both fly, but so do birds, and they're not a space shuttle. All right? So it definitely is a mistranslation. This is a very specific thing designed by Yehovah himself. It's not to be mistranslated.
Now, there's no way that it was a little, a one-light oil lamp.
Well, they originally had lamps on the 7th. They were little lamps.
Oh, so it was still a menorah.
Yeah, and
idea.
Then it evolved, and they would put candles on it. Nowadays, they're much more likely to put candles.
But it was not singular. It was definitely the 7 branch.
Really, and originally, it wasn't a candlestick at all.
No,
it was a lampstand.
Right.
But a very specific one with 7 branches. So what happens is, just like you said, that's in Matthew 5:15, where he speaks about the menorah. He says, you do not light a candle to hide it under a bushel, but put it on a menorah where it gives light to all in the house. And so that tells us a couple of really important things. Number one, the symbolism of that is just kind of screaming at you, right? He's using the menorah, not candlesticks,
right?
Not some
The truth of him who is represented in the menorah. So you do not hide the truth of Yeshua in the dark. You bring it out. You are to share it.
Exactly, and you put it on a menorah, which is the symbol of the Judaic religion.
Yes.
And they wanted to wipe that. They wanted to wipe that symbol out of the Bible. So they always mistranslated it as candlesticks. Same thing in the beginning of Revelation, where the whole vision of Revelation starts out with a menorah called the seven candlesticks.
Walking among the lampstands.
And translated into the seven candlesticks. But it's not what it said. It's a menorah. It's a menorah. And through this menorah, you're seeing the Son of Man on the other side. The symbolism of that is like exquisite and very clear and very different when you take the menorah out of the picture. So that's one of the type of typical things that they would change, along with the names of God and the names of and the name of the Messiah, which we're going to talk about. But here you have, you do. It also makes it very clear that in Yeshua's time, the menorah was used in the household.
Yes,
and
really, it had to been.
I would ask the people watching us prayerfully consider getting a menorah to use, to light on Sabbath, the Sabbath evening. Yeshua did it. It was used in his time, right? And so it's an important thing to do. And if you would please, don't get a Hanukkah that's got 9 branches. We talked about what was it? Theological substitution.
Yes, substitution theology.
Yeah, like when you replace the name of God with a Greek name, or you replace menorah with candlesticks or something. So what has happened since the menorah was outlawed, right, to the Jews, they started using a Hanukkah, which is based on the 9 days that the oil burned at the miracle at the Feast of Dedication, which is what Hanukkah means.
Which was a legend in the first place.
Right, so they're taking a substitute menorah and using it in place of the menorah that God told us to use. God told us to use this, not that. It's very clear. Okay, so we're changing it into that, and then we're substituting it for what God told us to do.
Rather believing a myth than the truth.
Right, like the name of God. God told us his name. He said, this is my name for generations, for a memorial unto all the generations. And so we, in our great wisdom, have wiped it out of the Bible. That is a tremendous abomination. And we will be talking about that later on. But the menorah is something that should be in the Bible, and it has been changed. Now, we talked about how there was a Hebrew manuscript tradition. And this is really, really significant. And here are some of the markers of it. But if you want it, you're going to have, for this Hebrew manuscript tradition, you have to look outside of the Roman Catholic versions of the Bible. Most people are not even aware. Those are not the oldest compilations of the Bible. The oldest compilation was in the 2nd century, about 150 AD, and it was called the Itala. It's actually in Latin. But these people had the original documents still available of the New Testament and the older ones of the Old Testament.
We talked about that when we were first planning this show. I wrote some notes here, and you said that the Itala from 150 AD had the entire New Testament in Hebrew? The entire New Testament?
This was the first compilation of by 150 it had all been written.
Wow.
Yeah, and they had that available. The original documents. Okay, so you got to admit that's going to be the most authentic, right?
Absolutely.
And it was looked upon that way. I mean, this was used throughout Europe, and it took 700 years for the Catholic versions to replace it. And that was mainly by destroying the churches and the manuscripts of those churches. Because it was used in the Celtic Church, it was used in the See of Northern Italy, the Waldensians, some of the Waldensians and other peoples of Europe. So, I mean, this is a battle for the word, and this really focused on Revelation. The warriors for the word, and people that were martyred for the word. Well, and that Satan was attacking the word. Well, how do you attack the word other than changing it and then killing people who don't go along?
Yeah,
right. That's how you attack the word.
Does any of this hinge on Constantine in the 300s?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, Constantine basically established the Roman Catholic Church, what came to be known as the Roman Catholic Church. And at that point, he established the divorce between the Messianic Church, the original church of the Messiah, they were called Nazarenes, and he divorced himself from them. And he established a Greek church, wrote the decree of divorce, and from that day on, the Messianics were heretics. Okay, now, and this was not because of orthodoxy. because the Messianic church, they were very orthodox. They believed in all the things that the Gentile believers did. And they believed that in the divine birth of Yeshua. They believed in the Word, the sacredness of the Word. So it was not because of orthodoxy. There were some variant groups. The Ebionites, were a little different. And they did have their own gospel too. But it was not because of their orthodoxy. They were very orthodox. They believed in the authority of the church at large. They weren't trying to lord it over anyone. It was basically because they were still followers of the law. And they still used the Hebrew Gospels. They still used the Hebrew manuscripts. And this was called Judaizing. Anyone who used the name of God in Hebrew or used the Hebrew manuscripts, Old Testament or New, they were guilty of Judaizing, which was punishable by death. And you can see this especially in the Spanish Inquisition in the Middle Ages. Now, you had a Hebrew manuscript on you, a Hebrew gospel. I mean, you were risking your life to copy and recopy and preserve the Hebrew Gospels. But they did it anyway. They risked death, and many of them were martyred for it. So these are the martyrs it talks about in Revelation.
And it's so funny because, not funny, but it's strange that they're from the same team. It's like buying a car, and two people buy a car. One decides to not look at the manual at all and decide how to drive it themselves. And the next person says, no, I'm going to follow the manual to the letter because that's what's best for this car. And that's how I'm going to take care of this car. And that, that would be called Judaizing. And that'd be like these people who say, don't you dare follow that manual. That's heresy. You do it on your own. You figure it out yourself.
Well, that's really, I think, one of the first things, the principal things that people don't understand about this whole history, which I wrote about in my book, The Sons of Zion versus the Sons of Greece. It is this battle between the Hebrew worldview and the Greek worldview over millennia. And much of that is concentrated on the war over the word. The war over the word. So, you've got and the thing that defines it is they created this Greek church, and their authority was dependent upon having the most authentic manuscripts of the word, in Greek, of course. So they could not, they're divorcing themselves from the Judaic church, and the in-laws go with it. That's the Messianic church. So they divorced themselves from the Messianic church and declared them to be heretics, right? So you got to choose. You want to go with the original church of the Messiah or this newfangled thing from out of town? No, really, that's what it is. And they became the enemy. And they began to persecute these Messianic believers, as heretics. And that continued throughout. I mean, that's evil incarnate, frankly, I have to tell you.
It is.
And that lasted for almost 2 millennia. There's some reason has been restored to it at this point.
And Yehovah does not allow people to get away with that because I love how Yehovah uses irony. So the very church that did that, so the Roman Catholic Church, they have the Vatican. Within the Vatican now, in their library, are manuscripts they do not know how to read, which are turning the tables on 2,000 years of history that they've been persecuting to these people because it's proving by the documents in these libraries that are in that library that the Hebrew manuscript was always correct and that their Greek way of things was a counterfeit.
And to be honest, we have to give them credit for what they've done since the Holocaust and World War II. They have achieved a great degree of openness about it.
And putting everything online now, and that's how Nehemiah was able to discover many things.
I got my manuscript, my digital copy of the manuscript, the Hebrew Gospels, from the Vatican Library. And I really had questions about whether they would release it to me, but they did. So they have been very open about this. I mean, really, the Messianic Church is not a threat to them anymore, all right? But it's still good. Give credit where credit is due.
For sure.
They have opened up. And I got to go to the Vatican and examine the manuscript I've been translating for the last few years, in the original, which was very meaningful to me, and look at some of the new manuscripts that have sort of popped up around there. So this really is what happened. And the story of it is fantastic because, the Hebrew Gospels from Catalonia were right there in the belly of the beast for like 500 years undiscovered. And the way that happened, they were written in Catalonia and Spain, but within They left probably at the beginning of the Inquisition, 1478, and then 1492. This is a real intense period of persecution of Messianics and Jews, but Messianics. And it was started in particular to crush the resurgence of the Messianic Church. 500,000 Jews had converted to Christianity, and about half of those were not trying to assimilate into the Greek church. They were trying to revive the Messianic Church of the first century. That's the real reason for the Spanish Inquisition. Wow. And so the Hebrew Gospels survived that, probably fled with the people that were fleeing the Inquisition, ended up in the Vatican Library, bound beneath another document in Hebrew, and lay there undiscovered until 1956, after the Holocaust. After for 500 years, it lay there undiscovered. And so I didn't discover it right then, but that's where it came from. It had been because they weren't encouraging anyone to learn Hebrew, so they didn't have anybody reading these things, but they did have the books. Wow. And that's how it survived, that's a miraculous story, isn't it?
It is, and I think the story is not done. So could we continue more next week?
Absolutely.
All right, excellent. Thank you for joining us today, Miles. And thank you for joining us. We'll see you next week for more from this story from Miles Jones on authenticating the Hebrew Gospels. Until then, Shavua Tov. Have a good week. Shabbat Shalom.
Shalom, Torah fans. Give this video a thumbs up and share it with a friend. Tap the subscription button and the bell icon. And I promise to update weekly with in-depth biblical research. Be sure to download the new michaelrood.tv app for both mobile and home devices for even more commercial-free content.